again. Today's lecture is number 9, and the title of this lecture is the translation of short stories. The learning outcomes, as usual, you should really ask yourself, can I show some kind of understanding? Can I explain? Can I demonstrate the concept of short story translation? Can I translate certain types of short stories? Now, by the end of this lecture, what I mean by the end of this lecture, not really after you've watched it or after you have read it like this. No, after you have studied it effectively, you sit down, you read it word by word, sentence by sentence, you take notes, you practice, you translate, and so on and so forth. This is what I mean by the end of the lecture. Not by just going through the slides one after another. No, I don't mean that. I mean after you have spent 1-2 hours studying this lecture. And inshallah, what I will do, I will attach with these slides handouts, so that you read the slides and you read the handouts, you know, in more detail. So hopefully you will have enough information to learn about this particular topic and be able to practice. But excuse me, I always stress, and I stress from day one, that this course is a practical course, and we are trying to make it as practical as possible. But you need to help me. How? By sitting down and saying, okay, Dr. Halima, I am working on it, I am at my desk, I am practicing, I am translating now. I understand what you mean by this concept, and blah blah blah. You know, this is what I mean by the end of the lecture. Okay, now what is a short story? What is a short story? Now you ask yourself, a short story, it's like it's the hardcore of literature. You know, it's like it has its own literary genre by itself. It's an independent speciality, and a short story is some kind of narrative. It is a narrative. This narrative could be true or untrue or fictitious, or this story, a short story, could be in prose and in poetry or in verse. You know, so a short story, it is shorter and less elaborate than a novel. A novel is normally huge. It's long. It's more complicated, more complicated than a short story. Now, a short story is a narration of incidents or events, a report of the facts concerning a matter in question. It has a plot or succession of incidents or events. These events or incidents, they could be a lie, could be a fabrication, a history or story of something happened in the past. Now, this is very briefly what we mean by a story. So a story is a narration, is a narrative, is a narration of events, of incidents. This narration could be true, could be untrue. They could be of any type. They could be a lie. They could be a fabrication. It could be a literary history. It could be, but anything that happened in the past, you know, a story. This is what we mean by a short story, really. Now, the main features of a short story: number one, it has to have a written base form. Although some among you might say, oh doctor, there are stories which are told only verbally. Okay, fair enough. But normally a short story, if you want to translate it, it has to have a written base form. Now a short story, it has high social prestige. People like stories. People like to read stories, like to hear stories being told. It fulfills an effective and aesthetic rather than transactional or informational function. Means the function of a short story is not to inform you or to give you instructions. No, it is to move your emotions, to have an aesthetic effect or function. Why? Because the main function of a story is to provoke emotions and entertain, rather influence or inform. So the main function of a story is to provoke emotions, to entertain you, rather than give you instructions or to give you information, rather to inform or to influence you. So these are very important features because they help you in translating a short story. If you don't understand what we mean by a short story, and if you don't know the functions of a short story, then you cannot translate it. So that's why I'm saying these things to you, to be aware of. It is and if we go into the language of the short story, they tend to have images. These images, they tend to be ambiguous, and they have indeterminable meanings. So you need to take into account all these features really, and then when you have a little story you want to translate from English into Arabic or from Arabic into English, you need to take these features into account. Now let's see here. I know it is really very small. I put it on one slide. Why? Because you can print it out. You can. I'm sure the majority of you are very good at word processing or in PowerPoint or in computer literate. So this little story, I would like you to translate it into Arabic. You can tell that it has pictures, and this is a short story. And this short story is written by an 8-year-old native speaker of English. So try to translate it and try to bear in mind that this story is written in English, and it has an English culture, and it is written for children. And how can I translate it into Arabic for children? So please, this is an exercise for you. This is an example of a short story. I mean, a story. Look, it could be something like 150. These are short stories. So any one of you can write short story in Arabic. It doesn't have to be really 1,000 words or even 500 words. Look at that, count the words and see. This is a nice story, and people. I mean, this is for children at certain level. Now, how can we translate short stories? There are different ways of translating a short story, and each one or every translator has his or her own style, her own way of translating. But we are giving you here guidelines, suggestions, hints, principles, ways, methods, approaches. You, as a translator, you are free to pick and see what is relevant, what is suitable, what you can do, what you cannot do. But here they say, okay, the first thing you need to do when you are translating a short story into English or from English into Arabic is to make first a crude handwritten draft that you never refer to again. This is a necessary stage, the stage of writing the reading in some palpable form. Writing mechanically for page after page fixes the reading of each individual sentence. It shows up the problem points, the deficiency in your understanding of the place where more work is needed. Now, when you write this draft, you write the Arabic without really then referring to it. But when you are reading, you are translating at the same time. This is very crude, very draft version of the translation. Then the next stage, involves really writing and rewriting. Crafting the sentences, using the dictionaries and thesauruses and encyclopedias. By the time you have finished a translation, you may have several drafts, including the initial handwritten scroll. When I write, especially, if you want really to know how I translate or how I write something and I sit on it. I don't mean sit on it, I mean leave it for a while. And then probably the next day come back, and especially in the early morning, I wake up in the early morning, I pray, and then I start rewriting, or I start writing. Really, the best time for creative writing, for writing, is early in the morning. You pray subh, and then with a cup of tea, and then start and work for 2 hours. Believe me, these 2 hours would be equivalent to 5-6 hours during the day. So the 2 in the morning is good for writing, for creating, for being creative, inventive. So this is how you could do it. And then you rewrite so many times in your head before sitting down at the computer that all you usually do is to make minor changes. So when you have done all these drafts, you write it very easily, and when you have done it. So this is just a way of translating a short story. But please, read these stages slowly, carefully, and with the intention to understand and learn. Now look at this. I have taken a little excerpt from the short story written by Halima, as I said, written by an 8-year-old child called Mustafa Ahmad Halima, to 2012. Once upon a time in the far lands of Mount Everest, there lived a poor woodcutter named Fred. He lived all alone in a wooden house with no pipes and electricity. He loved making snowmen in the winter, although he was not very good. Now this is the first paragraph, and to enjoy the whole story, I leave it to you, read the whole story. But what matters to us here is how to translate a short story for children, in particular, with regard to this one. Now, so would you translate the above as A, B, C, D, or something else? I will read them out. Okay. Let me change the glasses so that we don't make any mistakes. Okay. A. في أحد الأيام على جبل إيفرست عاش قطاع خشب اسمه فريد. عاش لوحده في بيت من خشب بدون أنابيب وكهرباء. أحب صناعة رجل الثلج في فصل الشتاء بالرغم لم يكن جيدا جدا. B. في قديم الزمان في أراضي جبل إيفرست كان يعيش قطاع خشب اسمه فريد. عاش لوحده في بيت خشبي لا يوجد فيه كهرباء. كان يحب صناعة رجل الثلج في فصل الشتاء بالرغم أنه لم يكن جيدا في صناعته. C. في قديم الزمان في الأراضي البعيدة من جبل إيفرست هناك عاش قطاع خشب فقير اسمه فريد. عاش لوحده في بيت خشبي بدون أنابيب وكهرباء. كان يحب أن يصنع رجال الثلج في الشتاء ولم يكن جيدا في ذلك. No comment. I'm not going to comment. I'm not going to say this is better than this is better than that. You know why? Because I expect of you to be able to assess now. Now lecture number 9, sorry. It is lecture number 9. And we have been talking throughout the course about being creative, being imaginative, being, critical thinker, critical and analytical reader. Look at D. يحكى أن حطابا فقيرا اسمه فريد عاش وحيدا في كوخ خشبي بدون ماء أو كهرباء في أرض بعيدة عن جبل إيفرست. أحب صنع رجال الثلج في فصل الشتاء مع أنه لم يكن ماهرا بذلك. So you now know the features of a short story, how it should look like, how it should sound like, how it should include. You know now the function of a short story to entertain, to provoke emotions, not to give you information or to give instructions or so on. No. So when you have this concept in your mind, when you are translating short story, then you should be all right. Okay? Now, excuse me. Here we are. Okay. Okay. Now, it's not only when you are translating a short story, it's not only translating the linguistic aspect of it. It's not only translating the cultural aspect of the story. It's not only translating the content and the form of the short story. You need to be able to translate the style. Can you make it? Can you create a childish style? Can you make, so not childish, I mean a style for children. Sorry, I used the wrong word. Childish, not childish, but I mean a style that children would appreciate. So can you create a style that is suitable to the environment? So each story has its own independent stylistic features. Now, as a translator, you should be able to really speak for the source writer. In other words, can you use the voice of Halima's voice in that short story? Can you speak on his behalf? Can you transfer his style for children in the Arab world? Can you make it suitable to our culture? You know, instead of Fred, huh? Why not Farid? Is there a problem with it? I leave it to you. So creative writing, you need to be flexible. You need to be creative. You need to be, you know, able to really maneuver and manipulate the linguistic choices available in the text. The cultural arena, you want to really go around and liberate yourself. Can you do that? Are you free to do this? Are you still near to the original text? Are you entertaining? Are you provoking emotions? Have you met all the features of it of a text of a short story? So you need to be able to really control all these elements when you are translating a short story. Now let's see another example. Let's see another example, to see whether the translator has managed to really achieve equivalence and equivalence in English and the communicative purpose of the expert in style that signals that this is a translation of an Arabic short story, you know, by an Arabic writer in a certain ecological, social, cultural setting. When you are translating the snowman story, you need to think, okay, this snowman story, you know, is I need to think of the ecological, the social, the cultural setting. It is a story written to people in England, and you know England is covered with snow most of the time, and they have their own culture, they have their own country. It's different setting. Can you translate it into another setting, whether it is in Saudi Arabia or in another country of the Arab world, or in the Arab world? Can you convert or transfer or translate, taking into account the equivalence question or the equivalence matter and the communication issue and the stylistic features of the story? This is a question you need to ask yourself all the time. Now look at this again. فكر في طقوس الحلاقة الممتعة المتبعة في بلده من سماع لحكايات الحلاق والغوص ببحر المرايا اللامتناهية. This is an extract taken from a story called Cat and Chat. Now I have given you three options, three choices, you know, of the translation of this. So I leave it to you to really analyze it and go through it and compare A, B, and C. Okay, taking into account the criteria we have been talking about. Now we move to the translation of religious stories. The translation of religious stories what is meant by religious short story is any classical literary story that has an Islamic religious theme. This ranges from tales told by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, written, you know, and to the stories written now. I mean, now you can write religious stories. So all this is included under this religious stories translation. Now, when you are doing any translation of such genre, you need to, you know, the genre of religion or religious short stories into English. You need to really be, really very, very creative. You need to be imaginative, but also you need to have this indivisible dual role as both writer and interpreter. So you need to be a writer and you need to be an interpreter, because you need to interpret and understand and translate, the short story, because the especially the source text is very, very sensitive. You need to be careful not to make any mistakes by misunderstanding what is meant by a short story. And one important point I would like you to bear in mind and remember, that you can be creative, you can be imaginative, you can go really wild in your translation of any genre, of any type of literary text, but when it comes down to the translation of the Prophet's hadith sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you need to be really, really careful. You cannot be so creative to the extent then you deviate from the main text. You cannot say to me, okay, I want really to be creative, and I want to make it really wow, to create a wow factor. You can do that with all types of text, but not with religious text. In particular, the Prophet's sayings, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because listen to, it is of vital importance to mention here that with regard to translating tales told by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whether via his own hadith sahih, his companions, or somebody else, the translator is not allowed to be innovative in terms of content, because it is not allowed in our religion. Read the following. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحدث في أمرنا هذا ما ليس فيه فهو رد. So this is the rule. You cannot really deviate. You cannot really drift away from the original text, because it is very sensitive. Okay? I can't stress it more. Now look at this story, look at the following part of hadith reported by Ibn Umar, in which the Prophet ﷺ tells us the story of the people of the cave. I love this story. قصة أصحاب الكهف. Beautiful story. Now how did Halima translated it or rendered it into English? I mean, it's been translated in Halima's book 2012, and you can see. I would like you to compare the Arabic with the English. Is he successful in conveying the equivalence, in achieving equivalence? Is he successful in communicating the message? Is he successful in translating the style? I leave it to you to decide. I'm not going to say yes or no. I leave it to you to decide. But I would read just the first couple of lines, because I really love this one. عن ابن عمر عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خرج ثلاثة يمشون فأصابهم المطر فدخلوا في غار في جبل فانحطت عليهم صخرة فقال بعضهم. I don't want to read all of it, but listen and enjoy and immerse yourself in this beautiful style and a beautiful story. Ibn Umar reported that the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said, once upon a time 3 men went out for a walk. On the way they were caught up by heavy rain. After they had sought shelter in a cave in a mountain, a huge rock fell down and blocked the entrance. Inside the cave they said to one another, let's call upon Allah with the best of our deeds. One of them then said, O Allah, I had 2 elderly parents. I used to set out, graze the herd, come back, milk the herd, bring the milk home and offer it to my parents first, and then let my children and wife drink. I used to set out, graze the herd, come back, milk the herd, bring the milk home and offer it to my parents first, and then let my children and wife drink. However, one evening I was held up and came back home late, finding my parents sound asleep. As I hated to wake them, I stayed up all night long with my children crying at my feet out of hunger, waiting for them to wake up by themselves. Oh Allah, if you know that I had done this just to please you, please make the rock move a little so that we can see the sky. As a result, the rock miraculously moved a little. I love this hadith. I love the translation. Okay, and at the end, I would like you to translate this little story, the snowman, into Arabic, and I would like you to complete the translation of this beautiful hadith into English. Thank you very much indeed, and I wish you all the best, and see you inshallah next seminar or next lecture. Assalamu alaikum.